As I was saying, this is the class. It's great to see so many folks here. I have a little problem, though. Normally what we do when we teach this class is we begin with a demonstration, because some of you know a lot about ham radio and some of you don't know too much about it. So to get everybody up to speed, we like to do a demonstration. But my friend Jeff is supposed to do the demonstration. He was supposed to bring the equipment, and I heard him on the radio earlier, but he's not here, and I'm not sure where he is. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just switch things around. Oh, there he is. Jeff! Jeff! Jeff!
Oh, hi Gary. I'm sorry, I was just listening to 20 meters. Oh, hey everybody. I didn't see you there.
Jeff, the class is tonight. You're supposed to be here.
I know, but I thought it would be easier to demonstrate some of ham radio from my shack here at home. Hey, why don't you bring everybody over and we'll give them a good demonstration.
Okay. I'll get my handy-talkie and I'll call you on the repeater. Okay?
Okay, I'll dial it in.
Let me see what this is all about. I need to put my jacket on. It's kind of chilly out there. AC40, AC40, KN4AQ.
KN4AQ, this is AC40. Are you on the way?
Yeah, I'm just walking out to the car now, Jeff. You know, it occurred to me, we're actually starting our demonstration now. So I guess maybe we better explain what we're doing.
Maybe we should explain how you were able to talk to me through the TV set a minute ago.
That was just television magic. Kind of like the way we're going to change things from night into day for the rest of this tape. But the rest of this is real, and we're talking on something called VHF FM with the assistance of a device called a repeater. And well, maybe we should explain what else is going on here, Jeff. Why don't you start by telling people about the Great Divide?
The Great what?
You know, the Great Divide, the difference between HF and VHF amateur radio. Why don't you tell people about that and give me a call back when you're done.
Oh, okay. AC40 clear. What Gary's referring to is that there are really two types of amateur radio. There's the worldwide communication that takes place on the shortwave radio, and then there's the local communication that happens on the VHF and UHF bands. The reason for this is that hams are allocated bands or small slices of frequencies throughout the radio spectrum. On some of those bands, the HF or high frequency bands, signals bounce off the ionosphere and can be heard thousands of miles away. But on the VHF, very high frequency, and UHF, ultra high frequency bands, signals don't travel nearly as far because they don't bounce off the ionosphere, and those bands are said to be good for local coverage, meaning out to about 100 miles or maybe a little bit more. That's the Great Divide that Gary is talking about. It's all the same big hobby of ham radio, but there are some very distinct differences in the way things sound and the way we use the spectrum on each side of that line between HF and VHF. In a future class, we'll go into a lot of detail about what the exact differences are. So far, Gary and I have been speaking on VHF, one of the local ham bands using FM, and we'll stick with that for the next part of our demonstration. KN4AQ, this is AC40.
You still there?
AC40, KN4AQ. I'm still here. Out in the parking lot now, so I'm sitting in my car.
Okay, why don't you show everybody the stuff in your car?
Okay, I sure will. This is a pretty simple installation, but I have a fairly deluxe radio. It operates on 3 of the ham bands that we use for local communication. The control head is mounted down here on the dashboard, where it's easy to see. The radio itself is back here under the seat, and as you can see, it's fairly small. This particular radio costs about $800. The average run-of-the-mill radio of this brand costs between $300 and $500, and you can buy used radios a whole bunch cheaper. My car's got a pretty good complement of antennas on it. Sometimes they call it a porcupine. You don't have to get this extreme when you're first getting started, though. In fact, what most people do is get an antenna like this. It's an antenna with a magnetic base, and they just plunk it on a piece of metal on the car and run the transmission line in through the weather seal on the door. I guess I should explain a little bit about this radio too. This is called a handy-talkie, or HT, or handheld radio. This one operates on 2 of our VHF and UHF, the local amateur bands. And a radio like this costs about $300. Now you can buy a simpler one starting at about $150, and they top out at about $400. They're handy. Okay, Jeff, I just showed everybody my mobile equipment. Why don't you show them the VHF equipment there in your shack, and I'll get on the road.
Sure, I'll be back in a minute.
The radio I'm using to talk to Gary is another model of dual band radio with a VHF and a UHF band. It's fairly similar to the radio in his car, but a lot less fancy and much less expensive. A radio like this one new sells for between $350 and $450. The antenna for this radio is mounted on the side of the house and is about 17 feet tall. I think Gary would put an antenna like this on his car if he thought he could get away with it. And by the way, Gary wasn't being insulting when he called my house a shack. The room where a ham keeps his equipment is called the radio shack or ham shack or sometimes just the shack. Okay, Gary, I've showed him my stuff here. Now I guess we ought to show what we do with it all. AC4ZO.
Okay, Jeff, will do.
Well, we've said we're talking about VHF FM communication. That's the local communication. The signals don't bounce off the ionosphere, they don't go around the world, and they don't go through the middle of the planet either. And that means we can talk about as far as we can see. We call that line of sight communication. That looks like I can see about 3 blocks. I guess I'll have to say we can talk a little bit farther than we can actually see. In fact, the range between a radio like my mobile and Jeff's base station is 5 to 15 miles. We can stretch things out to about 25 to 30 miles, but that's called fringe territory. At that point, I can only talk to him when I'm on top of a hill. If I get behind a hill or a ridge or down in a low spot, I'll lose him. The higher we can get our antenna, the better we can talk. In fact, if we could get our antenna on top of a mountain or a tall tower, we could talk a lot farther. We came all the way up to this mountain in Utah to illustrate the advantage of elevation in VHF and UHF line-of-sight communication. As you can see, we can see a long way from up here, and we can communicate a long way on VHF and UHF. So once again, the big advantage is elevation in VHF and UHF line-of-sight communication. Okay? All right, we've got enough. We can write off this trip. Yeah, let's go skiing. But it's a little bit inconvenient to drive to the top of a mountain when you're around Raleigh. So we've created these devices that do the job for us. They're called repeaters. A repeater is a special transmitter and receiver combination that receives my signal and repeats or retransmits it so everybody else can hear it. We put the repeaters on top of tall towers or mountains or tall buildings, and they give us a lot greater coverage from our mobiles. There's a repeater on Mount Mitchell in western North Carolina, and here in Raleigh there's 3 ham radio repeaters on the WRAL tower and many more repeaters on the shorter towers around town. In fact, we happen to be driving by one right now. The NC State University Radio Club has a repeater on this tower just west of the fairgrounds.
AC4ZO, KN4AQ, still there, Jeff?
KN4AQ, this is AC4ZO, still here.
Well, I've explained a bunch about repeaters, and of course we've been talking through one most of the time here. Tell you what, why don't you go
Search for some other activity and show what some real repeater activity sounds like.
Are you suggesting we depart from our carefully scripted dialogue and go looking for activity from other hams?
Sounds dangerous, doesn't it?
Well, I guess that's what editing is for. Okay, I'll look around and see what's happening.
Okay, call me back, KN4AQ.
Okay, let's tune around some other repeaters and see what kind of activity we can find.
It's no color to it, it's a natural finish.
Here's a few people talking. Let's see what they're talking about.
I'll believe a zero mic. I mean, you got a genuine Gibson with the factory orange sticker on it in a natural maple finish.
I think they're talking about Gibson guitars.
Yeah, well, except for like the 14-year-olds who sit around and they get mad because there's nothing to do except sit around.
There's some child psychologists
I see
here.
a lot of people leaving.
Good sound
I'm just passing Gibsonville exit.
Okay, well, we're just coming up on the Gibsonville exit.
Okay.
KN4AQ, this is AC40.
Well, we've taken the tour. What's next?
KN4AQ. Well, I got one more thing to demonstrate. I'm going to show folks the auto patch, so I'll be right back. What I'm going to show is a real useful accessory on repeaters. It's called auto patch. It's a phone line connected to the repeater, and it lets you make phone calls. Let's see how it works. KN4AQ on the auto patch.
Dialing.
Just dial like a regular telephone. We should hear it ring in a second.
Hello?
Hey Jamie, this is Gary. I was just demonstrating the ham radio auto patch. How do you hear me?
All right, Gary, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. What are you up to?
Oh, just reading the paper on a lazy Saturday afternoon.
All right. Well, like I said, we're doing a demonstration of the ham radio auto patch. Now, I'm on the radio, but you're just on the telephone, so that's kind of strange.
That's correct. You sound great, though.
All right. Well, I'm going to be on my way over to visit in a little bit. Can I pick up anything?
All right. Well, just bring along a gallon of milk, and that'll be great.
Okay. See you a little bit later. Bye-bye.
Great, bye. Call complete.
Well, that's pretty cool. But there's a couple of things I want to emphasize about an auto patch. It's not a replacement for your cell phone, and here's why. Your calls aren't private. Anybody can listen. You can't use the auto patch, or any ham radio for that matter, for your business. That means you can't call your office to pick up messages, and you can't call in to tell them you're coming in late. You can only make local calls, and you can only place outgoing calls. You can't receive calls from most auto patch systems. And finally, ham radio, especially on VHF, is great for emergency communications. You can call 911 on the auto patch to report an accident or a problem on the highway. And we use ham radio and VHF for all kinds of public service activities like walkathons and bikeathons. Those guys need communications, and we're the guys to give it to them. And when the weather's bad, you might want to monitor the Skywarn net and maybe even report some severe weather yourself. Our reports are relayed directly to the National Weather Service.
Right, weather copy. Just keep us posted if you see anything there, heavy winds or anything. We're just checking some stuff on the radar. About how far from Jordan Lake are you?
We also provide emergency communications to North Carolina Emergency Management during hurricanes and tornadoes and other regional disasters. AC40, KN4AQ.
AC40, I'm here. Go ahead.
I'm here too. Be right inside. KN4AQ.
Okay, AC40 clear.
Hey, Gary, how you doing? Come on in.
Good to be here. Well, we have showed ham radio from the VHF side of things, but it's time to give equal time to the other side of the Great Divide and show folks what high-frequency operating is all about. I think when most people think about ham radio, they think about talking to strange, faraway, distant lands. Does that still happen?
It sure does, Gary. Hams talk all around the country and all around the world every day. But I didn't drag you over from the class to tell you about it. I drug you over to show you. Can we make some contacts?
Well, we sure can. But first, why don't we show people a little bit about the rest of your shack?
Okay, well, we started with these VHF and UHF radios, and here's the rest of the station. This is the HF, or high-frequency radio, that works on the worldwide ham bands. HF radios can be purchased new for about $600 for an entry-level radio, and going up to beyond $6,000. A radio like this sells new for about $2,000. You can buy equipment used and save a lot of money, or some simple equipment you can build yourself for almost nothing. Surrounding the radio are various pieces of support equipment. There's the power supply, which provides the power necessary to run almost all the equipment in the shack. And there's some simple test equipment, and many ham shacks employ the use of a computer. And of course, outside are the antennas.
Oh, I guess we better take a look at those.
Okay, let's go outside.
Field trip.
There are 5 antennas up in the air here. 3 of them are for VHF and 2 are for HF. This one is the simplest. It may be a little hard to see on the video, but it's called a dipole, and it's just a long piece of wire running between trees across the lot. The cable dropping down from the middle is called the feed line, and that's what connects the antenna to the radio back in the shack. The dipole is used on high-frequency bands, and I've used it to talk to people all over the world. You can build a dipole for maybe $30 in parts.
How'd you get it up over the trees?
Well, I took this bow and arrow and tied a fishing line onto the arrow and shot the arrow over the trees and then used the fishing line to pull the antenna wire up.
Very clever.
This next antenna is called a beam, and it's also for the high-frequency bands. It's kind of like a giant TV antenna, and it works like one too. It concentrates my signal in one direction, so I have to use the rotator below it to point it in the direction of the station I want to talk to. A new beam for the HF bands can cost several $100s. I got this one used for $50, but I had to drive out to the western part of the state to pick it up. This is another beam antenna, but this one is for VHF. If you want to know why it looks different from an HF beam, stick around. We'll be covering that in the class on antennas. And we've already seen this antenna, the vertical that works on both VHF and UHF. It costs a little over $200, but I have a homemade version that was about $25 in parts. And we've already seen your mobile antennas too.
And don't forget about this. This is an antenna. It's called a rubber duck. Jeff, if I can use an antenna this small and convenient, how come you have all these big antennas?
Well, Gary, because big antennas high in the sky work better than small antennas down low, but sometimes they're not very convenient. You wouldn't want one of these big verticals sticking out of your HT.
I guess you're right. Hey, why don't we go inside and try some operating?
Sounds good.
Let's go. You got a pretty good antenna farm up there, Jeff.
Thank you, Gary.
Well, there's one more thing that we haven't taken a look at here in the shack. It's this device over here. Jeff, what is this?
That's called a paddle.
What's it do?
Well, I use that along with its electronic unit for sending Morse code.
Morse code? Is that still alive?
It's alive and doing very well, thank you. In fact, ham radio operators use Morse code to make thousands of contacts every day. You know, Morse code was the original form of radio communication, not only for hams, but for all the users of the radio spectrum when radio was invented about 100 years ago. Today, there's very little commercial use of Morse code, but many hams still love it. It's my favorite form of communication.
Well, then, in honor of Morse code, and because it's your favorite mode of communication, why don't we start our demonstration with that? Perhaps you can show us a little Morse code operating and maybe translate it back into English for us.
Okay, well, let's have a listen at what a busy band sounds like. As I tune across, you can hear some Morse code signals in there. I heard that guy just a minute ago. He's in Belgium. There's a lot of stations from Europe that are very strong right now. He's in Spain. PA-70's in the Netherlands. Let's try to make a contact now. I've checked the frequency to make sure it's clear, and I'm about to call CQ. Here's somebody answering our call here. This is F5MQW. That would be in France, I can tell because of the F at the beginning of the call sign. Let me give him a little information about us here. First, I'll tell him where Raleigh is. Just tell him it's in North Carolina and that the weather here is sunny and about 10 degrees C, 10 degrees centigrade. And now it's his turn to send. His name is Patrick, and he's about to send his location. Okay, here's his location. The town is spelled Lacras, Lacras, I guess. And he's in the southern part of France. Most Morse code contacts begin by exchanging some basic information, and after that's done, the conversation might turn in any direction. Sometimes the foreign station wants more information about our electronics in our station, or maybe they want to know something about the area of the country we live in. Perhaps how our nearby city of Raleigh might be different from their city of Barcelona or Rome or wherever.
Hey Jeff, hams really are keeping Morse code alive.
We sure are. I hope it's around for a long time. And while the ability to use Morse code is required for some ham licenses, it isn't required for every ham license, so let's not worry about it just yet. Could we try a voice contact?
Okay, I have found the microphone, pulled it out from where you keep it hidden. May I do the honors?
Sure.
First, let's tune across a busy phone band and see what it sounds like. Come on, Jeff, let's take a look.
Pacific Cable, this is Victoria.
November 2, Papa, Alpha, Quebec, November 2.
I think this station is in Spain. Let's see if we can give them a call. Echo Alpha 3, Quebec Papa. This is Kilo November 4, Alpha, Quebec. Kilo November 4, Alpha, Quebec.
Sir, 555 in Barcelona. My name's Golf Italy, November, Ontario. Back here, well, my baby is closer to the microphone. Kilo MC4 Alpha, Quebec. Echo Alpha 3, Quebec Papa.
Good afternoon, Gino. Good to talk to you. You've got a good signal here in the United States. My name is Gary, Golf Alpha Romeo Yankee, Gary, and I'm located near Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh's the capital city of North Carolina. Your signal report here is 5x7, and we're making a short demonstration for an amateur radio class. I wonder if you'd like to say hello to some students in a ham radio class here in the Raleigh area. Go ahead.
Gary, thank you very much. So for the 5 and 7 from your amateur radio class. So 5 and 5, 55, a good signal. The clear is so, the frequency is so clear now here on 15, and the signal's coming very strong from the state side. Okay, well, I'm using a 3-element tri-bonder, 150 watts from the icon 775 dB. That's all devices from my side. Back to you, Gary. Kilo MC4 Alpha, Quebec, Echo Alpha 3, Quebec Peter.
Okay, Gino, good solid signal here. Echo Alpha 3, Quebec Peter. This is Kilo November 4, Alpha, Quebec. Good solid signal, and appreciate your saying hello to everybody here in the class. Good to talk to you this morning, and perhaps we'll get a chance to contact a little bit later on when we're not pressed for time making a demonstration for the class. 73 EA3 QP KN4AQ.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much for the contact. Good afternoon from Barcelona, and this is up from your radio class. Kilo MC4 Alpha, Quebec, Echo Alpha 3, Quebec Papa, 73.
Pretty cool. Spain. We've seen Morse code in action, and we've made some voice contacts, but ham radio operators use lots of other modes of communication as well.
Packet radio and other digital modes are quite popular. You can use a computer to send text and data via radio, and no phone lines are involved. On the air, a packet sounds like this, but you don't have to listen to it through a speaker.
Ham operators can send television signals to each other. We can communicate through our own satellites in orbit, bounce signals off the moon, and even off the trails of meteors as they burn up in the atmosphere. Jeff, what else is big in ham radio?
Hams like collecting operating awards. Here's two very popular ones. This one is Worked All States, and you can get this award after contacting hams in all 50 states. And this one is called the XCC, and it's for working hams in 100 countries or more. And we like to exchange QSL cards with one another. These are the cards that confirm we actually made a contact. This card is from Corsica. It's an island in the Mediterranean. And this card here I received after talking to a guy on Fiji Island. And this other card is from Nigeria in Africa. And of course all of these contacts were made in Morse code, but hams work them every day using voice.
Yes, Jeff, on voice they do. And another big part of ham radio is contesting.
Whiskey 4 Delta Whiskey.
Shh, they're doing a contest.
QSL Doug, copy Mike in North Carolina.
We don't have to be quiet. They can't hear a word we're saying. They have headphones on.
Oh, well then why are we whispering?
I don't know. You started it.
Well, what's this contest deal all about?
Well, a contest is a flurry of activity on the ham radio that's not normally there.
Whiskey 4 Delta Whiskey.
Whiskey 4 Delta Whiskey.
Got it. Copy Mike in North Carolina.
Mike, that's an NC station. You were at contest. Whiskey 4 Lima Charlie.
The basic idea in contests is to make contact with as many hams as possible in a limited period of time. Usually the contact is short and a few specific pieces of information are exchanged.
W4DW contest.
W4DW from S4DW, November 4, Delta Whiskey. Dave in Tennessee.
Jeff, we've really seen a lot, but I've got one more question. Do you have to have a big station like this to enjoy ham radio?
Oh no, you can start small even with just a single handheld, and you can work your way up to a station that's much larger and many times more elaborate than this one. In ham radio, you set your own goals and your own limits. Let's take a field trip from our field trip and visit a couple other ham shacks, and I'll show you.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim, KF4RTX, and as you can see, I live on the second floor of an apartment building. This is my station, and as you can see, it's not difficult to get the equipment set up in an apartment. But the only problem is, where do you put your antennas? In my case, I couldn't get outside, so I had to put mine up on the wall. They're made out of 2 slinkies. They are not the most efficient antennas. However, they do get me on the air, and I've had contacts as far west as St. Louis, Missouri, and as far north as New York. So I'm able to talk to people around the country. My very first ham radio was actually a borrowed handheld, but I eventually bought my own handheld here. It's an ICOM T2A. It's a very inexpensive radio, comparatively speaking, with the rest of the handhelds on the market. And it's a very good radio to start with.
Well, Jeff, I think we've done it. We've shown about all we can of ham radio in a quick tour. Should we head back to class?
Well, Gary, I think if you look in the back row, we're already there.